Welcome to the Just Third Way podcast, where we ask the question, would you rather own or be owned? Brought to you by the Center for Economic and Social Justice at cesj.org. Hello again. Welcome to the podcast. Today we're talking about a very important subject as the front headlines in the news are talking about the situation in Hong Kong. And unfortunately, this morning I was sad to see that there's some weapons being used. It looks like, unfortunately, things could get violent, which is terrible. So we pray for the people involved for safety. We want to bring you a different message. And I've got the person who I think is the best one to listen to, really, in all the world about what should be done about situations like these. And that is Dr. Norman Kurland, who I call Norm. Hey, Norm.
Hi, Dave. Good to be with you again.
Right. Glad to have you. We're going to give you a way to solve problems when it comes to conflicts between basically people in power. And it's something that can apply to just about every country, but it would be a perfect solution for Hong Kong. And the solution that we propose is called the Just Third Way, and it's built around a philosophy called personalism. And you can learn more about the Just Third Way by visiting our global library at cesj.org. And that CESJ is the Center for Economic and Social Justice. And we just want to let you know that CESJ and the Just Third Way movement want to work with you in the Hong Kong protest movement to bring about freedom, democracy, and true justice for every person. And so with that being said, I'll turn it over to Norm, and we'll get his recommendations for you and your movement and how we can work together to make great progress. So I'll turn it over to you, Norm.
Thank you, Dave. To the people protesting in Hong Kong, we send our deepest appreciation for your great courage and for the tremendous risk, sacrifice, and suffering endured to bring about freedom and democracy for all, not only for citizens of Hong Kong. When you succeed, you will be an inspiration for all citizens of the world who seek more freedom and democracy, including citizens of China and the United States. I was extremely saddened by the pictures sent me of the young woman, the nurse who volunteered to help anyone injured in your nonviolent protest when she herself was struck by plastic bullets fired by police and became blinded in her right eye. Her noble work reminded me of the courage of the peaceful protesters I worked with as a federal civil rights investigator in Mississippi from 1962 to 1964. As descendants of former slaves from Africa, these citizens were denied on racial grounds equality with the Caucasian citizens of access to political and economic democracy and quality education. Leaders of all the southern states were convinced, as heads of key committees in the U.S. Congress, that they had the legislative power to maintain their segregation laws. But uniting peacefully in large numbers, courageous American human rights demonstrators like you in Hong Kong were attacked throughout the American South by police dogs, clubs, and rifles, and many were jailed. By 1964, following a peaceful 1963 demonstration of people power in our nation's capital, hundreds of thousands came together to support the American civil rights movement. And by 1964, our national legislature passed a law outlawing racial segregation. And the next year, 1965, they passed another law lifting all state laws denying equal voting rights. You in Hong Kong are now the conscience of the 21st century world. You demonstrate the power of peaceful protest. Your message teaches the world today that universal values and fundamental human rights matter, not only for you, but for every child, woman, and man on this planet. Your nonviolent demonstrations of people power reinforce the human rights strategy that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. taught Americans. The 25-mile or 40 kilometers long human chain you form, like the one in 1989 in Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia to remain independent of Russia, reaches out a hand in solidarity to a global community striving for unity and peace, rejecting violence, and struggling for basic human rights. Another great American, the late human design scientist, world design scientist, Buckminster Fuller, also adds another thought that the Hong Kong movement can teach the world. Bucky said, "We are called to be architects of the future, not its victims. Our challenge is to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time, with spontaneous cooperation and without ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone." On behalf of our all-volunteer Center for Economic and Social Justice, formed in 1984, I would suggest that neither freedom nor democracy can sustain itself without widespread understanding of basic principles of justice, not yet taught at all levels of learning. What's needed is a just third way that transcends the two basic paradigms of political economy that have been at war with each other since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century: monopoly capitalism and all forms of collectivism, that is, communism, socialism. Both systems concentrate power. Since, in the words of Lord Acton, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. A just third way paradigm can, and in my opinion, must be based on a new platform that hurts nobody and empowers every person, every child, woman, and man. Marx and Engels, in their Communist Manifesto of 1841, attacked the injustices of monopoly capitalism by stating, "You can summarize the entire philosophy of communism in a single sentence. Quote, abolish private property." However, if private property is defined not as the thing to be owned, but as the rights and limitations of an owner, because you can't do things, just do anything with your property, you can't hurt others, but it's the rights and limitations of an owner to control and earn the profits from that owner's contribution of either land or other natural resources and productive assets. And now we have robots and artificial intelligence and ways of creating energy without depending on the fossil fuels, for producing the marketable goods and services for others to consume in a market economy. Now, Marx and Engels would transfer all the rights and productive assets we're talking about, that is, capital assets, to what he called the dictatorship of the proletariat, from the opportunity of all citizens of the world to, quote, the state or some form of collective ownership. Now, collectivism ignores this 1820 warning of Benjamin Watkins Lee. And I'll quote what he said. He said, "Power and property can be separated for a time by force or fraud, but divorce never. For as soon as the pang of separation is felt, property will purchase power, or power will take over property." Now, Abraham Lincoln, who I feel is the greatest president the United States has had, but in his campaign in 1860 for president, he offered a just third alternative to monopolized capital ownership by stating, "I don't believe in a law to prevent a man from getting rich. It would do more harm than good. So while we do not propose any war on capital, we do wish the humblest man," and he should have said woman and child, "an equal chance to get rich with everybody else." The nation state is the only human institution, or what I call a social tool, that is a legitimate monopoly that should be created and supported by people within every democratic society to promote freedom, democracy, and justice, settle disputes, and provide security. The state should be economically dependent on all its citizens to protect their economic and political freedom from the inevitable abuses of concentrated power by bureaucrats, politicians, or citizens who today monopolize economic power. When citizens organize to promote the enactment of laws that promote economic and social justice for all, I haven't defined those terms, but there is no justification for the state to own and control productive natural resources and advanced technologies that could be owned by citizens to supplement their incomes from their labor or contributions of the productive capital that could be owned by all citizens through more just and effective monetary, tax, and other laws, and particularly the formation of central banks and local commercial and cooperative banks that can provide not consumer credit, but insured capital credit to all citizens, credit that would be repayable with future profits. And normally that's in a few years. And then it becomes incomes, and you could eliminate the need for welfare, charity, and people can have the means by which they can do more work for the common good, such as you citizens, the citizens of Hong Kong, are doing. That's work for the common good. There's no reason for the 8 richest citizens of the world to own more than half the world's population. Why should the richest 1% of Americans own more than the bottom 90% of Americans? Something is defective in our institutions that can be corrected. What's missing for most citizens of China and the United States, as well as all nations in the world, is reflected in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted in 1947 at the close of the Second World War, at the birth of the United Nations. This is a critical human right that has been omitted by every nation in the world. Article 17 of this document reads, everyone, in other words, every person, has the right to own property, alone as well as in association with others. And then it adds, no one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his property. Such a universal message and plan of action will enable you in Hong Kong to reach to the citizens in mainland China and to those around the world who struggle for human rights, dignity, and a better future for all. We invite you to explore a new system that was not really created by the Center for Economic and Social Justice. These ideas were first published in a book challenging Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto by two great, my most important teachers. One was Louis O. Kelso, and the great book's philosopher in the United States was an Aristotelian Thomist philosopher who taught at Columbia University and the University of Chicago before I studied there, who published a book called The Capitalist Manifesto. This was in 1958. And that book offers for the first time in my life, even after I studied law and economics at the University of Chicago, it's the first time I could understand justice and universal and economic justice in chapter 5 of that book, which is available at our website. And Adler's comments about Kelso's discovery. But these were great ideas. And of course, we talked about other people who contributed to the just third way, including several of the popes at the Vatican. And we're hoping that the Vatican will be a source of promotion of economic justice, an encyclical on economic justice. So we invite you to explore this new system on universal human values, one that transcends the dehumanizing and power-concentrating systems of capitalism and socialism and communism. This just third way that we call personalism is based on social justice and economic justice. The new alternative would provide every child, woman, and man with equal economic opportunity by being human and with the access to the means to acquire direct ownership stake in new tools and technologies that will be added each year, not only in China and in Hong Kong and in America and throughout the world, in the poorest nations of the world. Once this idea is studied by the citizens of Hong Kong, I would love to see Hong Kong be the first political system in the world to lead the world in a just future, which can hold the unjust use of power by government, hold it in check, and make government again the servants of all citizens. Thank you.
Wow, that's a great word, Norm. It really is. And I believe that would be the best solution for Hong Kong, because they have already been an absolute beacon of economic freedom. And we're in favor of enhancing that in a way that makes it far less temporary. And I believe that that would be, instead of having a centralized few in government and also on ownership of the money and banking system, to instead decentralize that power. And really the only way that we found that that can be done is to have widespread ownership of the actual economic system. So I just want to mention that the specific proposal that we're talking about is where the citizens have a voting share in their regional central bank, and they are able to have transparency and accountability, because that is where the true power lies in our society right now. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the central bank issuing a credit to every citizen that's calculated based on the productive growth in the economy divided by the number of citizens. And you take that sort of investment voucher and choose what dividend-paying corporations you want to invest in, and basically create an income for life that takes advantage of technology, because, you know, the way things are going, we're not dealing so much on manual labor. We're dealing on ownership of technological systems. So I just wanted to add that. That's a very specific example. Do you think I got that right, Norm?
Oh, you certainly do, Dave. And you know, your comments made me feel that I should have said more about the three basic principles of Kelso and Adler on economic justice. There are three. They're a system. There's a input system, which we call participative justice, where every individual should be able to participate in the production of wealth, either through their labor power or through their ownership of the tools that could provide them income as technology displaces the need for labor and frees people economically and politically to engage in work for their own, what Aristotle called the work of civilization, the kind of work that they'd love to do. Even politics, people would go into politics not for the money, just as founders of America did. They didn't get paid to produce the Constitution, which starts with the preamble. Is beautiful. It says, "We the people," in order to form a more perfect union. In the next two words, establish justice. Now, the three principles of economic justice that Kelso and Adler added was an input principle, but with an input principle in a system, you need an output principle, and that's distributive justice. And I'll describe, as I said, participative justice is the right of a person to contribute their labor or their capital or both. It doesn't matter. That's why you can have every person, even if they're not working in the labor force. Teachers should become owners. Professors should be able to teach without being paid, and there are wealthy professors who take $1 a year for teaching. So but then distributive justice. Some people say distributive justice is distribution based on need. No, that's distributive charity. But distributive justice is determined objectively. The value of your labor you should receive. You shouldn't get more. You shouldn't have the state double. When I was a child, it was 25 cents an hour, and now it's gone up to it's roughly $8 an hour, but there are people who are saying, politicians in America saying, oh, it should be $15 an hour. Well, that's going to increase prices, and who's going to be hurt the most? The poor, because of prices of things that they buy. So the market system, but the market system won't work unless everybody can become an owner and begin to get income from profits. Nothing wrong with that, as Lincoln said. Everybody should have an opportunity and be able to work either for pay when necessary, and more doing the work of civilization. So that's a way in which a system has input and output. But a system also, you never design your institutions and laws perfect. We are not God. And therefore we have to accept the imperfections. And therefore there's a feedback and correction principle. We call that social justice. And some of the best writings on social justice are in the encyclicals of the Vatican. Beautiful. They agree that people should be owners. So it's very important that other religions and philosophical groups begin to recognize what is property, what is ownership, and how can we achieve universal human rights.
Right. That's very, very true and very balanced approach. Consider those three characteristics of a system.
Yes, and social justice, incidentally, is a way in which numbers of people get together voluntarily doing just what the citizens of Hong Kong are doing, despite the hardships that they're going through. They will convince the government of Hong Kong and even the government of China. Kelso also invented a technique where workers in the private sector could become owners. I was his Washington counsel and wrote with a few others the first laws making worker ownership available to workers in the private sector. It didn't affect teachers. It didn't affect people who worked for social institutions or government workers. It did not affect everyone, but it did work. As a matter of fact, we were able to design a model employee stock ownership. And the Chinese government, before Tiananmen Square, had sent people that I took to some of the companies owned by the workers. And they invited me to come to China. But when Tiananmen Square occurred, I said I would not have anything to do with the government at that time. But today it may be possible for peace in the world, for prosperity in the world, that China, I could care less whether the United States or Hong Kong. Well, I like what's going on in Hong Kong. So it may be Hong Kong will change the politics of China, that the leaders will decide it's time to turn their citizens, give them that fundamental human right to become owners.
Right. Well, I think you were about to say you don't care where it happens, but some...
No, I don't. I really don't. I think the world needs it. We got climate change. That's a problem. We can destroy life, but also war is a problem today. And I'm aware. I spent 5 years in the Air Force back in the 50s. In Strategic Air Command. So I know the dangers of military weaponry, but I also know that the best solution to war is win the war of ideas. And I gave a talk to the War College, the National War College, to the faculty there. To introduce them to the just third way. But let China, let Hong Kong be the source of bringing it to the world. They deserve it for the sacrifices now being made, and I hope those in government in Hong Kong and those in government in China begin to recognize and not send troops and police to try to suppress those who are promoting ideas for freedom and justice and democracy.
Right. Well, I will encourage people who are listening, especially those in Hong Kong, if you want to organize with the Just Third Way movement. The first thing you can do is visit our global library at cesj.org. That stands for Center for Economic and Social Justice. And once again, we just encourage you to join with the Just Third Way movement. Make that the Hong Kong movement to bring about freedom, democracy, and true justice for every person. And we believe that in order to have that, there's got to be economic justice. And there's other ways to connect with us. You can search for the Just Third Way podcast and listen to more podcasts. You can look on Blogspot for a Just Third Way blog. There's some good information there. We're on social media. Search for the Just Third Way on Facebook and join us there and interact, volunteer. I'll volunteer on the CESJ website. And we will do everything that we can to help you organize. If it involves setting up a local chapter of CESJ or however you want to proceed, we will do what we can to help empower you with ownership and decentralized power in your local area and your country, and propose to lawmakers how to make it happen peacefully. And like Norm said, it's done through people power, and that's what you have right now is people power. It really is, and that is the number one way to make something happen. So with that being said, I guess we'll sign off. Do you have any other things you want to add before we go, Norm?
No, thank you, Dave, for your comments. Beautiful, and I'm looking forward to the future as a result of this opportunity you've provided me. And
Great.
And the Center for Economic and Social Justice.
Well, I think it is providential that you were able to see this happen in Hong Kong and be available to suggest a route of true change.
Our key books and articles and even videos. President Reagan's video would be very good and for people to watch when we helped form the Presidential Task Force for Project Economic Justice under President Reagan, and I think that was great. But we had people of both parties. Hubert Humphrey, who ran for president, recommended that we go beyond the policy of a wage system, which has been a policy that I think has hindered not only American development, but also the development of all nations in the world, to follow the wage system as the answer. No, it isn't. We have to connect people up to power over the technology that can liberate them. So again, I appreciate your mentioning the contacts to the website. There are many articles, and it's available to people. We're an all-volunteer operation, so we appreciate the volunteers in Hong Kong. Thank you.
That's right. And I'll just close by saying our main slogan, and that is own or be owned. You can join CESJ by going to cesj.org and clicking on participate, and you can become a paying member for $25 per year, and also a student membership is $15 per year, and that qualifies you for discounts on our materials, such as books, which you can buy many of and distribute to your friends and family. And also, if you'd like to participate and comment on the podcast, feel free to call. I have a voicemail set up. I'd like to hear what you have to say, and I'll play it on the podcast. The number is 678-719-2840. Own or be owned.